I think the idea of times of challenge and how you grow, it can be hard to see, I'll say, in the moment. I found in my life that I recognize that growth with a little bit of distance. I may not recognize it, in the moment, but it's upon reflecting and looking back and seeing how you've responded that's sort of where you recognize that growth.
Hey, Flip Your Script listeners, it's Kristi Piehl. Funny story about today's guest. I was sitting at my son's high school graduation ceremony and I took out my phone. My husband leans over and whispers, "Are you actually working right now?" I said, "No, I'm taking notes. The speaker would be a great podcast guest." And today's the day. Michael George has flipped his script a few times. He was Notre Dame's mascot, the famous Leprechaun. He graduated and secured some secretive jobs at some of the most recognized companies in the world. Michael encourages people to live a good story, and that's why I'm thrilled we finally got him on the podcast. Welcome to Flip Your Script, Mike.
Hey, Kristi, thanks. Thanks so much for the invite, and really glad to be here.
So the whole leprechaun thing is probably like what people have the most questions about. So I think that's where we should start, just to get it out of the way. How did you go? You went to a Catholic high school in Minnesota. You go to Notre Dame, and then suddenly you're the most recognized face on campus. How does that happen?
Yeah, and people often wonder, like, did I go to Notre Dame just with the intent of being the leprechaun? Say, I'm short, but that wasn't really my, drive by going to Notre Dame. It was an opportunity to do something a little different that I never would have imagined. So I started out at Notre Dame. I was pursuing engineering, so very much, not in the, out in front of the sports world kind of life. And I remember, though, it was sophomore year, I ended up going to a Notre Dame hockey game with some friends, and it just so happened I was wearing a green suit that night. I was Luigi from Mario and Luigi, the video game characters. And Mario had left me behind. I was with some other friends. And all of a sudden, the leprechaun came out and was leading a cheer for the hockey team, and he needed some help. And I think I got voluntold probably into helping out. But I soon found myself with a Go Irish sign. So I ended up flipping it out in front of the audience. And I got back to my friends, and after doing a few rounds of cheers, they looked at me and they're like, Mike, pretty good at that. You should try out to be Leprechaun. And that was sort of the first time the thought entered my mind. I thought it was crazy at the time. I said, no way, that's not me. But the thought sort of stayed with me.
You decide you get voluntold to stand at this hockey game with the sign. You're wearing the green outfit, which is really a funny visual. I feel like the turtle and the peach were like Princess Peach were sitting next to the hockey game with the whole thing. So you get told to do this, you do it. Your friends say like, hey, you should try out, even though you have no experience being a mascot for anything. Why did you decide to do it?
Yeah, it's funny. In high school, I tried to avoid the spotlight, I feel like, and this was the exact opposite. Why I tried to do it, it seemed like a really cool opportunity to do something that, I could never have imagined. I think I started down the path, and, I got to a point where I realized that I had the opportunity, and let me just keep going. So I flash forward to springtime. I had grown out this full leprechaun beard now in my, I wasn't going to count it out. And I remember things started happening that seemed to be too many things happening for it to just be a coincidence. So I'll give you an example. I was in my physics class one day, and I had my leprechaun beard, and I knew that there was one other guy in my class that was trying out to be leprechaun. And I just happened to ask him that day. I caught him right at the end as he was walking out of the class. I said, "Hey, do you know when the leprechaun tryouts are?" Because, at this point, I said, I've got the beard. I got to at least go through with it. And he was like, "Oh, well, they're tonight." And it's funny because if I wouldn't have stopped to even ask that question, it's like the whole story never would have happened. And, I know I got into it, and I remember going to the first tryouts and just being really excited about the opportunity to do something truly unique and make an impact. And I think that was probably the first element for me, was the opportunity to do something cool. And what you may have heard and you sort of referenced in your intro, I actually sort of discovered a little bit later as I went through this tryout process. As some people might, I said in high school, I tried to shy away from the spotlight. I started to get really nervous about this, as I worked my way through and they started eliminating people, and I was in the remaining pool of people. And I remember very clearly, one day working on my leprechaun speech, and we were going through tryouts. It's a multi-week process that they sort of whittle people down, and I was just really worked up. And I happened to walk out into my hallway in my dorm, and one of my friends was there. He was studying for a class with another guy in the dorm. He was actually on the basketball team, and he could tell sort of right away that something was a little bit off, and I was worked up. He said, "Hey, what's going on?" And I sort of told him, "Hey, I'm working on this leprechaun speech." At that point, I'd kept it pretty secretive. I wasn't spreading the news yet. And what was really amazing to me, and I think sort of speaks to helping other people, and also the he didn't have to take the time, sort of coincidence. He said, "All right, well, let's hear it." And so he was able to stop and clear his day, and he grabbed his friend, and they had me run through my speech several times in front of him, and really started to get me believing into what being a leprechaun could be, and that I could actually do this. And I would say both from he didn't have to do that. When I look at too many things happening to be a coincidence, and I think really that speaks to also the sort of friends sort of recognizing what's going on and just taking that moment. So from there, that led me successfully through to the final round. I think this is the point where I mentioned in my in my commencement address about living a good story. And I found out that I was in the final five. And so the final five now is a big deal. The initial sort of work through is just a small group of people off to the side. The final five, the whole school is invited to come and watch this. And so now you're trying out to be the leprechaun. And so I had this moment of realization of, wow, this is maybe this is a bigger deal than I intended to get into. When I first tried this out, as I was sitting there thinking about it, it came to me all of a sudden of, I've gone this far. Why not at least see it through? And, at the very least, I'm going to walk away and have a great story to tell. And, I think about being able to tell that to my friends or family, and, presented with this opportunity, why not try? And I think that idea really stuck with me. And that idea then of, giving it my best, and at the minimum walking away with a great story, out of it, is then what allowed me to keep moving forward, even though I was admittedly fairly nervous about, taking on the persona of the leprechaun in front of the entire school, and what that might mean. So that was sort of, I guess, what drove me through that point. There was much more to the tryout process, I'll say, but
so I have questions. I'm speechless about the whole thing, because I had no idea that so many people wanted to be the leprechaun. How many men are on campus growing out beards trying to be the leprechaun at Notre Dame?
Yeah, the chin strap beard, at least when I was on campus, seemed to be a decently popular hairstyle, a beard attire. I don't know how everyone feels about that now, but, when I tried out, we probably had about 15 or so people trying out for two spots. And in reality, one of those was the leprechaun from last year, who was, sort of treated as a shoe-in. So you had about, 14 people trying out for one spot. And that was an interesting group. And I'll say something when I walked into this I didn't realize is I also had to learn to be a cheerleader. I was coming into this, I was an engineer, was not in my peak physical form. And so in addition to, trying out and giving leprechaun speeches and practicing what that might mean, I was also learning to do stunts and toss people in the air and getting the basics of cheerleading. So it was quite an interesting experience working through the multiple weeks of tryouts.
It seems like you have a disadvantage, because I suspect that some of the other leprechaun candidates really, really wanted to be the leprechaun and showed up on campus to be the leprechaun, and maybe even had some experience in cheerleading. And then you're a guy who shows up and is like, my friends told me to do it. I want a good story. Like, did they beat you up after you won?
No, I mean, once I was wearing the green hat, you can't beat up the leprechaun after that. It's sort of a bad look on campus at Notre Dame. But yeah, I mean, it wasn't something. I think you can be surprising what you can come across in life. Maybe things you weren't expecting. There definitely were people that were trying out that they'd always wanted to be the leprechaun, and yeah, part of me felt a little bad, I guess, but coming in, it really was about giving it my all. And then, ultimately why I was trying out to be a leprechaun in the first place, and wanting to support the school and really believe in what I was doing. And I think that was something that really drove me a lot through, my leprechaun years.
It sounds so funny to say it. My leprechaun years. I love it.
Yeah. It was different. It took some getting used to. when I first was selected, I remember sort of having these waves of like, wow, I don't even know, what's next, and this seems like a big deal. But I sort of went back to that living a good story again, and thinking about how do I do that, and then how do I also represent the spirit of my school, because I felt that it was more than just putting on a costume and running around in front of students. So I think that sort of kept me going, and yeah, through a lot of really awesome experiences.
So you were someone who wasn't comfortable in the spotlight and had no previous experience in the land of mascots. And now you find yourself as a mascot. Certainly there were some things that happened that didn't go exactly as planned. Can you share one of them?
Yes, that did happen occasionally. I think one of the more ones that sticks with me was I was writing a inspiration email to the student body, as the Leprechaun has been sent it out to 10,000 people that are enrolled at Notre Dame, and we had just lost the last football game, and I really wanted to rally people around. So I had this awesome message written up to share with the student body. At the end, I wanted to sign it off with something catchy, and I thought back to the last game, and I remember the student body, singing "Don't Stop Believing." And, as we were down and trying to come back in the games, I was like, "Oh, this is perfect." So I'm gonna add it at the end, and I remember typing, and as Bon Jovi says, "Don't stop believing," and I hit send, and thought that was great. There's one problem with that, of course, is that "Don't Stop Believing" is not by Bon Jovi. It is by Journey, and you would think that someone might proofread the Leprechaun's emails, but I remember very vividly that night when the email was scheduled to go out. It went out at 10 p.m. And at 10 p.m. and 15 seconds, I get a message from my one good friend, and she goes, "Hey, that was a great email, but that's Journey, right?" And my inbox, Kristi, kept blowing up with people just responding, and just goes right back to you. I got so many responses that it actually broke the email response system at Notre Dame. And typically, you wouldn't see the responses that would go to me, but I got so many responses that one time someone's response went to the entire student body, and then everyone got the picture that maybe I knew that I had I had missed the quote there. So that was one that there's nothing I could do about it. Definitely, it was an example of a bit of a public failure on my side that everyone was aware of. And I think someone wrote an article about it too and posted it online. So, there's no hiding from the spotlight in that situation.
And I say this all the time. Everyone's needs a fact checker and an editor. Even the Notre Dame Leprechaun needs
That's right.
people
Pop
around.
Culture, not my
Yeah.
strength.
Did you have to put out a public apology? Did you have to recant? Did they always sing "Don't Stop Believing" at you because now it's just kind of a thing?
Lots of good ways to pick on me from there. I chose, I knew I needed to respond probably in a non-traditional way. So what I chose to do was I said, I'm going to incorporate this as part of my next pep rally. And so, at the next pep rally, I took the stage and knew that everyone had seen this email. And I told everyone, it was reminding them that actually Bon Jovi had called me to say that Journey had called him to say "Don't Stop Believing." So it was a telephone chain situation, and so that's how I explained clearly that's what happened, and was able to move on from there. But embraced it, didn't run away from it, and I made the best of it.
It's a great message. So you're someone who shows up on campus not wanting to be known or seen. You're an engineering student, which I don't know if you describe yourself as an introvert or an extrovert, but you're someone who wasn't looking for the spotlight.
Right.
And suddenly you, with that whole, chin strap beard, nobody really can miss you. And you're at all the games, you're on TV. I saw you in a ESPN commercial. You're famous on campus. And that's a pretty significant switch, really, in a couple of weeks from, don't look at me. You don't need to see me. I'm just over here doing my thing. I'm here to get a job. Mm-hmm. And here I am. Everyone look at me. How did you do that mentally?
Yeah. It was interesting. I think, so I did the Leprechaun, I was a Leprechaun at Notre Dame for 2 years. The first year I was sort of like the understudy. And so, I was selected, but I got to be a little bit under the radar, the first year and sort of grow into the position. By the second year though, I definitely, I was known as the Leprechaun, and it was, it was interesting because yeah, you couldn't really. People did sort of point it out as you're going across campus. I mean, I don't. It wasn't like normal celebrity status. People weren't asking me for autographs or anything like that. And I guess in that way, I felt very much like another student athlete on campus, where I felt I had an opportunity to represent the athletes and the university. And I think when I put on my Leprechaun hat, I really stepped into that role, and I stepped into what that meant, and I was totally great, with being in the spotlight. And I think sort of outside of it, I guess it just came with it, and I grew into it, and I felt like a normal engineering student, because I was spending all nighters in the library and such. But I guess it was a learning experience for me. But my classmates, I wasn't treated like a celebrity, I guess. So in that sense, although people definitely knew who I was.
I bet. And when you think about you've talked about it a few times, the leprechaun hat. So when you think about, to me, that's such a metaphor. Is putting on the leprechaun hat a metaphor for stepping outside your comfort zone? Is it a metaphor for living a good story? Is it a metaphor for trusting your friend? What is it a metaphor for you? Because you talk about it it's a transformation.
Yeah, and I guess I really treated it as a transformation. When I put on that hat, I definitely stepped out and felt different. And I removed my inhibitions of you wouldn't find me today at a sporting event jumping around and making a scene, but I absolutely was doing that when I was the Leprechaun. And so I think when I talk about putting on the hat, that really is maybe a great metaphor for life. And think about doing something like that, being able to then put yourself out, push yourself past your comfort zone. In a way, I guess the suit gave me permission to do, crazy things that maybe a normal, you're not going to see a normal person, I don't know, dancing up and down. I mean, hopefully you are dancing up and down the stands for your favorite sporting event, but I got to do it, even crazier, interacting with fans and, running out on the court and things like that. So I guess it really was, a metaphor for just as you suggested, stepping out of your comfort zone, removing the limits that you artificially, place on your mind, right? I think we put limits on what we can and can't do. And, by throwing on the Leprechaun suit, I took on a different persona, and I removed those limitations, for myself in it, and led to a lot of really cool things.
Which is a great place to stop, because the next place I want to go is to talk about how being the Leprechaun helped you in one of the most secretive careers outside of the government, which is being a Disney Imagineer. So stay put. Flip Your Script is produced by Media Minefield, an agency specializing in earned, owned, and paid media. With clients all over North America, Media Minefield was founded on the belief every story has value, and the power of a story is unlocked when it's shared. Oh yeah, Media Minefield's my favorite agency because I started it in 2010 when my 12-year television news career ended. I won some Emmy Awards, got to tell some incredible stories, met some amazing people, and then I was laid off. And that's enough of my Flip Your Script story. You can hear it and others by subscribing to the podcast. And if you like what you hear, don't forget to rate and review. And now back to today's guest. You go from being Leprechaun, you graduate from Notre Dame, you're an engineer, and you get a job that is so hard to get and is so secretive. So I know even us talking about it, we have to be careful. But we could say you were a Disney Imagineer. And for people who don't know what that is, what is a Disney Imagineer?
Yeah, the Disney Imagineers, they're the people that help, I can't remember the official company line here, but helping design and create and imagine the places that you go when you go to experience Disney. So we're talking the attractions, the resorts, the shows, the cruise lines. It's that arm of the Walt Disney Company that's sort of on, dreaming up those projects and then bringing them to life. So
thank goodness for the show Imagineers on Disney Plus, because in the middle of the pandemic, we had just come, and my family, we just came off of Tiger King, and we needed a little soul cleansing.
Well, palate refresher after that one.
Yes. And Imagineers, if you haven't watched it, watch it. it really takes, folks behind the scene of some of the
Yes.
things the Imagineers do, because before, like, for example, the Star Wars ride that's out now that everyone is talking about, or the Pirates of the Caribbean back in the day, no one had ever seen anything like that because it literally didn't exist
Hmm.
until the Imagineers dreamed it up and made it real. So can you
Yeah.
tell us how you got the job? Because that isn't like just put out on the internet, hey, who wants to be an Imagineer?
Right, right. Well, that was my thought process. And thank goodness for that Imagineering. I think it's the Imagineering story on Disney Plus. Definitely, highly recommend that for those that might be interested in learning a little bit more. It's great. Yeah, it's something that growing up, I always had a fascination with roller coasters. I'll say, which maybe already pushed me towards that industry. And I think Imagineering was always a dream job, but it was one that I assumed that I could never have. And just you mentioned, hey, they're not advertising for people on the internet who wants to be an Imagineer. And I think honestly, that was my thought process, graduating. So I graduated Notre Dame. I took a job with a different company. It was going well. It wasn't quite the job for me. And this sort of led me into this, discovery of what might be out there. And I actually did take a moment and I just went on the internet one time and looked up Imagineering jobs. And I saw that there were some posted openings. I just remember staring at it in disbelief because like, there's no way. I mean, I didn't assume that they didn't even hire people. It just sort of, because there'd be so many applicants that those jobs would get filled right away. And so, I saw that though, and I remember staring at it, and then you get that first trigger of like, well, I could never be an Imagineer. Like that's too far out there. And it's like, no, you got to sort of put those away. And I started digging a little bit deeper, and I ended up I threw the weight of the Leprechaun behind it. I reached out to people that were at Disney that had Notre Dame connections, and I said, hey, I was the Leprechaun. I filmed an ESPN commercial, and Disney owns ESPN, so I'm already at Disney. Will you take some time and talk to me, about what Disney's like? And I just tried to reach out and see what might be out there, and I was able to connect with someone that had heard potentially maybe of an opening as an intern with Imagineering, and so I sort of followed this along. And at this point in time, I still had a full-time job post graduation, was living in Indiana, sort of down the traditional path. But I followed this through and had some conversations, and eventually got to the point. I ended up on what I thought was an informal call, ended up being an interview with my future manager, and got to the end and was really excited about what Imagineering could be, and a new skill set of project management that I had never heard of in an industry in design and construction that I was completely had no experience with, other than my mechanical engineering degree. And they offered me the opportunity to take an internship. And it was a 6-month internship down in Florida where I didn't know anyone. And I thought, and they said they'd give me the weekend to think about it. And I remember, sort of mulling it over and being surprised that I didn't have more things to think about, that it just felt like something that I needed to do. And so I ended up quitting my full-time job. I ended up had to return some of my initial signing bonus from my first company, and moved down to Florida on the 6-month internship. Was the only thing that I was given out of the gate. And they told me, conversion percentage is pretty low. But it felt like a story that I couldn't leave on the table, and something that I knew I'd always questioned if I didn't go pursue it. So that's sort of what led me down to Imagineering, and went after something that I thought wasn't attainable at all. And those 6 months turned into 6 years, pretty much, down at Disney in Orlando, through a lot of really cool experiences, all within project management.
So many applicable lessons from your story, not just, hey, you basically don't live with regrets, but also you identified kind of a dream that felt really unattainable. And
Yeah.
then, you looked into it, and then you leveraged what you had. And it's so smart to think about, well, I don't have the background, but I was a leprechaun, and people love the Notre Dame Leprechaun, so might as well see if that worked out. And it did. You took a flyer and it worked. And like, what's the worst that could happen when you take a flyer? Someone says no. Well, you still have a job. It's not like you lost anything.
Yeah, I think that that's really an interesting thing, is just to be able to, why not? Like, what's the worst case that can happen if you give something a shot? And once again, maybe then you can say, hey, I tried out to be, a leprechaun, or I went and applied to be an Imagineer, and hey, it didn't work out, but you still then knew that you tried. And I think that's, what's the I can't remember the I don't know if it's a Babe Ruth quote or I can't remember.
Oh,
Sorry.
Wayne Gretzky says you
Oh,
miss
yes.
is that right?
Wow. Yes, absolutely. That's great. I'm showing my sports prowess here, here at the Leprechaun, but I can't remember famous sports quote. Yes, you miss 100% of the shots you never take, right?
Yeah.
Wayne Gretzky, and I think also Michael Scott from The Office.
Yes.
Yes. So actually is definitely applicable when you look at, pursuing things that you might never have thought were possible.
Is there anything that you worked on at Disney or saw come to light that you can talk about, or is it all completely locked down?
There are lockdown components, but I can tell you the stuff that, I felt really fortunate. I have the chance to work on a few things. When I started at Disney, if you've been down there before, it was downtown Disney at the time. So the first project I got to work on as an intern was the conversion of downtown Disney to Disney Springs, which is a really cool it's their retail, dining, entertainment district. So you can go there without going into the parks, and it's a really interesting place. There's lots of good stories there. That was a multi-year thing. I think probably though my favorite has to be I got the opportunity to work on Soarin. And so if you've heard of Soarin before, it's a hang gliding simulator ride. Oftentimes they do specials on it on TV. The first creator of it built the model set out of Connects to sort of sell the idea, but it's a hang gliding simulator that's really very cool. And part of the reason I was so excited about it is growing up, I think I mentioned that I was always obsessed with amusement parks and roller coasters. And I told my parents, hey, I'm going to grow up and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to build roller coasters. And as I would design my early amusement parks, I'd always make a ride for my dad. He would tell me that his dream, and he'd actually have, dreams that he was flying. And so his dream was always about flying. And I said, Dad, when I grow up, I'm going to build you a flying ride. And so I had this really surreal moment when I was at Disney and I found out that I'd be working on Soarin', where I said, wow, this is something that feels really cool and that I never would have expected. I'm actually going to have the opportunity to build a flying ride. And so for that reason, it became really special for me. I didn't build the original Soarin'. That was, it's been in the parks now for a few years, but in 2016 or so, we expanded it at Orlando to allow more people to experience what Soarin' is. Around that same time, they changed what you're flying over. It was originally soaring over California. Now it's soaring around the world. So being able to roll that out, and then in the end, take my family on it, and actually, not only my dad, but also my grandma, who was almost 90 at the time, to be able to take her on that was a really special experience. So those are some really cool things that I got to work on at Disney, and feel very proud of them.
I can't imagine what that must have been like for him, because you've been saying this for so long, and then really your whole from Notre Dame to Disney, it's really about giving other people joy. That's what you do. And as an engineer, I don't know that people think, ooh, engineering, I can give people joy. But that's what ultimately your career is.
Yeah. I think the point is right. It more than just, you don't have to be defined by, the exact career path that you're in or what you're doing in this present moment. But I like the idea of, giving people joy. And if you can find a way to do that, or whatever speaks to you, it doesn't have to be limited by what you think is possible, in your career. That you might find other ways to, in this case, I guess, bring people joy. I hadn't thought about it like that before, but that's a really interesting perspective.
So how did you go from Disney, where you're giving children and grandparents joy, to Royal Caribbean, and you're giving really a different type of joy, maybe to the same audience, maybe a different audience? What did you do there?
Yeah, it was a great opportunity. After a number of years at Disney, I started to look at where else things could lead me. And so Royal Caribbean at the time, if you've been on a Royal Caribbean cruise before, you know that their ships often stop at one of their islands. So Coco Cay is their island. It's in the Bahamas, and they had recently started adding different attractions to their island to allow people to have do something a little bit different maybe than they had expected. In fact, I think of think about doing something different. They built the tallest water slide in North America, I think, is on their island in the Bahamas. So, something that kids might get excited about doing besides just a barbecue on the beach. So they were building out this group that was going to create exciting themed entertainment experiences on their islands. And so I had an opportunity to join them, which I thought was pretty cool because the way it was sort of pitched is that they'd be, developing things on their island, and I'd be able to fly, out to the Bahamas. And so living in Miami and flying out to the Bahamas and building something on an island sounded like a really cool experience, and a great way once again to build a unique story. Even if I walk out and didn't like it, at least I could say, yeah, flew around in the Caribbean to build some stuff for a while. So that was sort of the opportunity to join Royal, and that's what I ended up doing for a little while. It was pre-pandemic, of course, so the cruise industry was going really strongly, and so I moved to Miami, but quickly spent a lot of time out in the Bahamas because we were getting near the end of opening one of the phases of the island where they built a beach club and some floating cabanas that hopefully you'll get a chance to see the next time you visit Coco Cay. So I spent almost all of January and February living in the Bahamas, helping Royal Caribbean open this next phase of their project. And it was a pretty great experience. And I guess in a way timed well as we opened the project and then came back. And I think all of our worlds changed at that point as COVID sort of took off and brought us to where we are today.
Which forced you to flip your script again.
Yeah, this one maybe, I had an opportunity to maybe change things up. The themed entertainment industry was hit particularly hard by COVID, and so figured I might try something a little bit different. And so now I've sort of done the exact opposite in terms of I stopped going further south and stopped being in Florida, and I recently moved up to Chicago, and now I'm a project manager for the AZEK company, which is an innovative building manufacturer, the building supply manufacturer rather, out of Chicago. So completely different industry, and I've sort of had to learn the new elements of manufacturing and IT and what it means to be in building products and think about things in a new way, but definitely carrying the experiences of project management and what I've learned through my years in Florida at Disney and Royal Caribbean and the Leprechaun with me.
When you get a phone call from your former headmaster that says, hey, would you give a commencement speech? What did you think? Because this is the first podcast you've ever done. You're not out there as a public figure. So were you like, what, me?
Yeah, that I had a lot of those thoughts. I definitely had the what me thought, at the time was I had started my new job with AZEK, but I was working remote. So I was, living with my parents in Florida, and, I just remember, am I really the right person to be able to deliver a commencement speech was the first thought of, why did you select me? And then I think the second part, there definitely was a moment where I had to, step outside and said, wow, I'm starting to get a little bit worked up about this one. It's been some time, it's been a number of years since I've been speaking in front of a lot of people. So I definitely had both of those thoughts. I'm surprised that you are calling me, and do I really have a message to deliver? And then, okay, I need to, put my leprechaun hat back on, right? Live in the moment and be able to step outside of myself, outside of my, my fears and anxieties, and be able to step into something and deliver a commencement speech. So those were the early thoughts of it for sure. Yeah. And yeah, that led to, I guess, reflection and delivering the message that came out during commencement.
And the notes that I took: live a good story, pick an interesting plot line, which your whole life shows you have and are doing, take on challenges, don't let failure scare you. I love this one because I think that not just to graduating seniors, but to anyone, in times of challenge, the main character grows the most. Let the narrative develop.
Yeah.
And then you talked about your faith and how God writes our story for good. So if we go back to the in times of challenge, the main character grows the most.
Yeah.
Why did you want to give that message to those students who, P.S., let's think about the class of 2021. The class of
Right.
2021 had been, proms were canceled, sports seasons were canceled, dreams were canceled, college visits were canceled. They're the class that was impacted by COVID significantly, as was everyone. But when you're a high school student, your senior year is the year that you dream about. And all of those students had a pretty significant change to their plans. I don't know that anyone would say that was a terrible year, because those kids got to go to school and they ended up doing some things. But still, the message of, in times of challenge, the main character grows the most. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, we lean into that, and it ends up happening. I think if you look at the class of 2021, they experienced that, right? It might not have been their choice, to walk through those times of challenge, but definitely it ended up happening. And so yeah, their proms got canceled, maybe their plans got changed, but then it helped them, sort of reframe around what really matters. And I think that the idea of times of challenge and how you grow, it can be hard to see, I'll say, in the moment. I know, when I look back on my own life, whether it be right after COVID, found myself unemployed, it doesn't feel it in the moment. You feel stuck in the moment. And I'm sure that a lot of people through the pandemic and maybe the class of 2021, felt stuck at times with the situation that they were in. And I found that really, you can only recognize, I found in my life that I recognize that growth with a little bit of distance. I may not recognize it, in the moment, but it's upon reflecting and looking back and seeing how you've responded, that's sort of where you recognize that growth. Because ultimately, we don't choose those challenges. Sometimes they're put on us, and you do respond and grow. And I wanted to encourage them to keep working through those challenges, and that they will make it through. And that, in the end, as tough as it is now, like, that's where you grow character. And, when things change and, you have to respond, and maybe it wasn't your plan, that really helps you grow.
And the fact that you were saying it, because I think you can read your bio, as I did at the beginning of this, and think that guy has had no challenges. Are you kidding me? He went to Notre Dame. He was the Leprechaun. He worked for Disney. He got to go from Miami to the Bahamas regularly. Like, what kind of challenges does that guy have? And you talked about it, because I think it's easy to look at other people's lives and say, they don't have any challenges. But you talked about it as if, hey, newsflash, we're all going to have challenges. Yeah. And we should share our stories.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to be really careful about that too, because, I know I've shared a lot of the things in my life that are exciting, and I've been excited about them, but there's a lot of stuff also that maybe isn't that exciting. And I don't want to paint the picture of, wow, I had just, have this amazing life, or, wow, there's no challenges and there's struggle and hardship that everyone goes through. And I think you hit it, like sharing your story, right? I mean, in today's day and age, right, I can sort of repeat what I think we've heard before on social media. It's really easy to see people's highlights. I've shared with you today some of my highlights, but we don't always get the full picture of all of the challenges too. And I think recognizing that everyone's got challenges that they're going through, and I think sharing our stories and sort of building community with one another, around some of those challenges is really important. And I think that's what, that leads into good friendship, right? I mean, when you have good friendship, you can sort of know your challenges, and not everything ends up being perfect, right?
And it's clear, based on your story, that in the times of challenge that you did have, you made friends, because it was those people who came around you and said, hey, you should do the Leprechaun. And by the way, I'm going to sit here and stop what I'm doing, and I'm going to listen to your Leprechaun speech. And then I'm going to help you get this job over here, and I'm going to encourage you over here. So that just proves that in the time of challenge, when we need other people, you got to do the work before then to build relationships and to have authentic friendships and to have community, because otherwise, getting through the tough times, it's not a job for one person. It takes a whole group of people.
Right. Absolutely. And I think, when I look back on, tough challenges I mentioned, I found myself unemployed after pandemic started, I'll say, my sister ended up calling me almost every single day, and and talk about the value of relationships, both friendship and family. And that was something that I didn't recognize how much I needed and how much I appreciated, once again, until I sort of reflected back. But that simple act of sort of reaching out and making sure I was doing all right, even though like, yeah, I felt fine, but her commitment to reach out and develop those relationships was, and to make sure that I was doing all right was great. Definitely helped me through, my next stage. So definitely encourage your listeners, if there's, focus on those relationships, on family and friendship, and those things are really important, and they can help you through, both help you and you can help another person too, maybe without realizing it.
It's a great place to end and to get to the question that I ask everyone at the end of the podcast, which is there a quote or something that has helped you as you've continued to flip your script?
Yeah, it's a great question. I remember thinking about it when I ended up coming back to something that my dad used to say to me all the time. There's actually my grandpa's quote, and it was just live. And I think that that's really great. My dad used to say it to me all the time, growing up. He still does, to be honest. My grandpa passed when I was younger, so I sort of, I get stories of, who my grandpa was and the great things that he did. But that message to sort of just live, I think, really spoke to me and, sort of formed me growing up, right? I mean, just live to me is, all right, not only, live a good story, but be present in the moment. And I think, focus on living, right? I mean, there's so many things that you can tie together, but for me, the idea of just live really tied into live a good story, go out and try new things, see where life can take you. And that sort of has stuck with me, I think, as I flip my script and continue to flip my script and see the next adventure and the next story that's out there.
Thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing. Again, I know this isn't your normal and you took time out of your work day. So thank you for sharing your story. I believe it will help other people.
Kristi, thank you so much.
In listening to Mike's story, there's so many things we can take away from it. And I think the thing for me is I'm never going to look at a leprechaun hat again without thinking about the symbolism of get out of your comfort zone, try something you won't do. And I love walk away with a great story. My hope is Mike's story empowers you to believe you're capable of more than you think, to discover motivation, to uncover inspiration, and to find the strength to turn the page.
Thank you for listening to Flip Your Script, hosted by Kristi Piehl and produced by Media Minefield. If you like our message, please be sure to give us a 5-star rating, subscribe to the show, and share our episodes with your family and friends. Do you or someone you know have a story about flipping your script? We'd love to share it. Contact us on our website, flipyourscriptpodcast.com. To stay up to date on all things Flip Your Script, make sure to follow host Kristi Piehl on social media. You can also check out the website for pictures, resources mentioned in the show, and other great episodes.